everybody. Let's see. Hi, Bryn, and hi, Carter, and hi, Callie, and hi, Silas, and hi, Morgan. Did I do everybody? Bryn, Callie, Silas, Carter, Morgan. All 5 of you. So happy first day of our really strange coronavirus shutdown. For history, we're going to be finishing The Courage of Sarah Noble. We're just going to keep going with it, And I forgot to read something really important to you, and that is the author's note at the beginning. Because what's really kind of fun, and you should be getting your black composition notebooks out, because while I read, just like in class, you're going to be drawing different things you hear me reading. But here's the author's note. It is a true story. Says this is a true story, though I have had to imagine many of the details. Sarah Noble was a real little girl who came in 1707 to cook for her father while he built the first house in New Milford. Most of New Milford settlers came from Milford, Connecticut. And remember, they were going out into the wilderness of Connecticut. But John Noble and his family came from Westfield. Do you remember which state they came from? Which colony at that time? They came from Massachusetts. They had bought a share of land from one of the Milford men. And the story happened in Connecticut. But a story like this might have happened in many of the other places in America. Stories like this of faith and courage and friendship live for a long time and are told and retold. The settlers of New Milford dealt fairly with all the Indians, just like the standards of their time, and they were always friendly to the Indians. Sometimes the story is told that John Noble, Sarah's father, left her with the Indians while he went to guide some men to Albany. I have preferred to suppose that he went to bring, or at least to meet, the rest of his own family. That seems more possible. When Sarah grew up, she taught what was probably the first school in the town. She also married, as in the story she says she will. The records say, too, that Sarah continued to be friendly with the tall Indian who loved her as he did his own children. All right, I hope you have your black notebooks now, and you're going to start listening, or you can even read something or draw something from the part I just read, called that author's note. But I'm going to be starting on chapter 6, because that's where we are at. And this chapter is called Friends. Natalie's here with me, and this is Yorkie sneezing. I think you guys have met them both. All right, here we go. Oh, he's got a big sneeze. You can let him go. The Indian children did come back again and again. Remember when we left off, she had just had Indian children come and visit her, and she was afraid that maybe she was rude to them. She was afraid that maybe they'd never come back. But the Indian children did come again and again. Sarah soon lost all her fear of them, and they lost their fear of her. At first, the children all looked alike to Sarah when she began to know each one. 2 of them she liked better than all the others. They were brother and sister, a tall, serious boy, and a little girl with lively black eyes. Sometimes Sarah tried to read to them, but after the first time, they did not listen. So Sarah tried teaching them words. Pointing to the table, the stool, the fire, she would say the names slowly and clearly. And then the Indian children would say it, or try to say those words, shouting with laughter, and with their tongues they could not find a way around those strange words. They in turn showed her where the wild strawberries grew. So she went out and filled a basket with the berries, which were like red jewels in the grass. When John Noble came home with a duck he had shot, or a fish caught in the river, he would find ripe berries waiting too. They traded with the Indians for corn and ground it with small mortar and pestle that Thomas had brought in one of the saddlebags. Sarah made corn cakes with it, cooking them in the ashes, and all the time she thought of her mother's good bread, baked in the oven. Oh, if she had an oven. I need help to raise the logs for the house, John Noble said. There is a tall Indian who has said he will help me. I cannot say his name, so I will call him Tall John. He speaks a few words of English. Father, Sarah said, the Indian children point to their houses and want me to visit them. Should I go? This page has a picture. John Noble did not answer at once. He sat with his head in his hands, saying not a word. This was his daughter, and he had brought her to this wild place. Often and often he had wondered if he had done right. And what, after all, did he know about these strange people? Sarah waited for her father to speak. At last he said, Tall John has 2 children, Sarah. I think they are among those who come here. I would trust you to go to the house of Tall John. Oh, said Sarah, it is Tall John's children that I like. So Sarah went often to the house of Tall John and his wife. She could not say the long, long names of the children, so she called the boy Small John and the girl Mary, after her mother. The Indian children called her Sarah, for that name was easy to say. Sarah, Sarah, Sarah. Their high, clear voices echoed up and down the valley as she played with them and learned their games. Sarah, Sarah, Sarah. And now we're on chapter 7 already. Keep up your courage. In the fall of the year, the house was almost finished. A little house, very small in the wilderness, and small too beside the great maple trees that looked down on it. The house was brown, and the trees had put on their finest scarlet and yellow. Sarah and her father, Tall John and Thomas, all stood and looked at the house. The big chimney promised warm winter days and nights. Outside there was a woodpile, neatly cut and stacked. It's a good house, said John Noble. Good, said Tall John, who never used 2 words where one would do, even if he spoke in his own language. It is a beautiful house, said Sarah. When can we live in it? And when will Mother come, and Stephen, and Hannah? Here's the picture. Her father did not answer her at once. He looked at Tall John, and Tall John nodded. Then Sarah's father took both her hands in his, and he looked down into her eyes. Sarah, he said, you have been brave, and now you will have to be braver. I must go to fetch your mother and the children. It is too far for you to go, and it will be better if you stay here. It is. Stay here? Alone? I am afraid. She heard herself say afraid, and it was the first time she had said that word out loud. I've lost my courage, said Sarah Noble. To be afraid and to be brave is the best courage of all, said her father. I'm going to read that part again because it confused me. To be afraid and to be brave is the best courage of all, said her father. But you need not be afraid, and you will not be alone. Dry your tears, Sarah. Tall John and his squaw will take care of you. You mean, said Sarah, not quite believing the words, you mean I am to live with the Indians? That is what I mean, her father said. Does it seem very hard to you? Sarah thought it over. The Indian children were her friends. She loved Tall John and his squaw. But to stay with them? To live in their house? While her father was away? That was quite another matter. And again, Sarah was afraid. But she knew that Thomas would be needed to carry goods when her father brought the family back. Thomas and the other horses. Of course, there would be no place for Sarah to ride. The next morning, Sarah was very quiet as she stirred the mush for breakfast. "Sarah," said her father, "you will be safe with Tall John and his family." "But," said Sarah, "what if the Indians from the north come? Tall John is afraid of them." "The Indians have not come from the north for a long time," her father said. "You know the Indians on Guarding Hill. They keep watch all the time. I would not leave you, Sarah, if I did not think it was safe." But to himself he said, "Am I doing right to leave her?" There was worry in his mind. The frost was on the ground when Sarah stood holding Tall John's hand to watch her father start on his journey. Her cloak was wrapped tightly around her. She was not saying anything, but her mind, always busy, was making pictures. Trees, trees, dark trees, narrow paths through the forest, wolves, bears. Suppose her father never came back and she had to live with the Indians all her life. Now her father was mounting Thomas. Sarah patted the horse's nose, and his long, solemn face seemed suddenly very dear to her. John Noble rode quickly away, turning once, twice, 3 times, to wave to a very small girl in a red-brown cloak. "Keep up your courage, Sarah Noble." Now he was far away, farther away. The trees hid him, and now he was out of sight. "Keep up your courage, Sarah Noble." Sarah's fingers were cold in Tall John's hand, and the tears she had been holding back splashed on her cloak. Tall John swung her up on his shoulder, and then they went, long strides, down the hill, across the river, to John's house. And there's the picture. So just on this day, this first day of the coronavirus shutdown, when we're having all kinds of strange things happen, we're reading in the very hard time that she had back in the year 1707. And that was a much harder thing than we have to do right now. So that's a great thing for you to be thinking about, as everything's different at your house and at my house. And you be praying for us, and we're going to be praying for you. And make sure you draw some great pictures every time we get together, and I'll read more to you tomorrow. Bye-bye, you guys.
Bye.